welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody's doing okay. As promised, I'm going to bring you some history kind of videos, something coinciding with our Thrones of Britannia gameplay we're doing live. This video is from House of History and it's about the Battle of Evesham, which is my town, in 1265. For a little bit of context, this is basically the barons in England rebelling against the king and trying to force a rule of government rather than a monarchy, and it come down to a bit of a battle in my town. If you like this kind of content, it really helps the channel out if you subscribe, like the video. We do live streams every night. Like I say, we got the Thrones of Britannia gameplay. If you like this kind of thing, you'll love that. Without further ado, let's get on with it.
In the year 1265, in the town of Evesham, England, Simon De Montfort, a war-weary veteran nearing 60, led a rebellious army. Among his
Think of a guy in like 1265 who's getting on for 60 and he's still doing battles. that's crazy, man.
captives was the English King Henry, whom he captured the year before at the Battle of Lewes. As dawn broke on August 4th, De Montfort received chilling news. Cavalry bearing familiar banners were approaching, but they were not allies. It was a royalist army commanded by the king's son, Prince Edward. They outnumbered De Montfort's forces by at least 3 to 1. Panic gripped the rebel forces as the realization dawned that the royalists were closing in. There was no way out as De Montfort prepared his troops to fight in what would become known as the legendary Battle of Evesham.
Legendary. It is an Evesham.
We are all dead, men, for it is not your son as you believed. Although De Montfort appeared to rule England, his grip on power was tenuous. The papacy disapproved of this usurpation of royal authority, and French King Louis IX declined to arbitrate any peace treaty. Meanwhile, the Earl struggled to keep all barons in line, with internal disputes increasing in frequency. Ever since Lewes, De Montfort faced threats from Welsh marcher lords loyal to King Henry and exiled royalist relatives in France. Prince Edward's knights rebelled in October, and the marcher lords rebelled in November, prompting Earl de Montfort to seek the assistance of Welsh King Llewellyn to crush these uprisings. De Montfort achieved military success by trapping royalist marcher lords between Welsh forces and his own armies, forcing them to agree to terms. These lords relinquished their lands to De Montfort, while they were exiled to Ireland for a year, in exchange for Prince Edward's eventual release. But tensions persisted. Despite initially accumulating wealth by acquiring towns like Bristol, Chester, and Newcastle, De Montfort's relationship with his most important ally, de Clare, soured. In May 1265, an attempt at reconciliation between de Clare and de Montfort failed. Then, in late May, Prince Edward escaped de Montfort's custody at Hereford. Together with de Clare, they organized a rebellion. Subsequently, royalist leaders John de Warenne and William de Valence landed in Wales to support the rebellion. Edward's escape gave the royalists a military leader and a rallying point, and de Montfort's position rapidly weakened.
There's so many points in this story that if just one slight thing hadn't have gone right for the royalists, the whole history of the country could be so different. There's so many different points along this story, as we're going to see.
Prince Edward met with and swore an oath to Gilbert de Clare, promising to uphold charters and customs, expel foreigners, and consult only with Englishmen. A month later, he launched a campaign against de Montfort. Edward captured castles and towns, while de Montfort retaliated by attacking de Clare's lands and moving into Wales to raise more troops. While de Montfort was in Wales, Prince Edward captured Worcester and Gloucester, 2 crucial cities commanding the Severn River. Edward virtually blocked the army's escape route. As the balance of power shifted to the royalists, de Montfort attempted to evade Prince Edward and the marcher lords. However, Edward's forces gradually closed in, and de Montfort's escape plans were foiled when his ships were sunk in Newport. Trapped in Wales, he made his way to Hereford before planning to rendezvous with his son, Simon the Younger, in Evesham. After about a month of marching and gathering troops, Simon the Younger arrived in Kenilworth to Edward's northeast. The prince, seeking to prevent reinforcements from reaching De Montfort, devised a cavalry raid on Kenilworth. Simon the Young's army was caught off guard. The Chronicle of Melrose described the attack as a surprise assault on the sleeping baronial forces, resulting in a massacre. Many of Simon the Young's men were killed or captured, with Simon and a few survivors retreating to Kenilworth Castle, leaving their horses, armour and weaponry behind. Yet as the raid was ongoing, De Montfort received news that Prince Edward's army had left its position guarding a river crossing. Gathering his troops and the Welsh spearmen with him, De Montfort crossed the Severn River and headed toward his son's army in Kenilworth. De Montfort arrived in the town of Evesham around August 3rd or 4, planning to avoid a direct confrontation. The town of Evesham was encircled.
This map isn't exactly to scale, but I live around this area somewhere, around here-ish.
The town of Evesham was encircled on three sides by the Avon River. To the south lay an 8th century Benedictine abbey near the Evesham Bridge. Just north of the town were cultivated fields.
That abbey is what I told you guys about in the stream the other night. It was a pretty important abbey in Britain.
Followed by a low ridge called Green Hill. 3 roads entered the town from the north. The Worcester Road from the northwest, the Alcester Road through the ridge from the north, and the Stratford Road over the ridge from the northeast.
This is what confuses me a little bit, and I would love to know more about and why Simon De Montfort made this decision to camp in the town or at the bottom of the hill rather than at the top of the hill. Because everything I know about medieval warfare, you want to be at the top of a hill, especially if you're defending, and you don't want to be attacking up a hill at all. So I'd love to know more why he chose to do that. It seems to be a pretty big mistake.
De Montfort, likely exhausted, set up camp in a vulnerable position below the high ground.
Yeah.
Heavy.
See, it was below the hill where he camped. And I'm not supposing he could get all his men up that hill because the battlefield's not a big place. But you would have thought he would have put some sort of fortification up there, at least something.
Rain and sodden ground hindered any coordinated formations. He commanded 350 cavalry and between 3,500 and 5,000 infantry soldiers. So
yeah, getting 3,000 to 5,000 men camping at the top of that battlefield, yeah, that's probably not plausible, okay, to make sense. But again, would have thought they would have taken advantage of that as soon as they could have, at least, in some way.
Among his captives was King Henry. In contrast, the approaching royalist army outnumbered him at least 3 to 1. Prince Edward commanded 1,300 cavalry and at least 10,000 infantry. As the prince approached Evesham, he ordered Roger Mortimer to cut off De Montfort's escape route to the south. Unaware of the danger, De Montfort prayed on the morning of August 4th before preparing to march his troops out of town. Suddenly.
So again, we got another sneak attack, basically, by William. Seems to be one of his strategies. That's how he got his son, and that's how he's getting him as well, by the looks of things.
A scout reported approaching armed cavalry bearing the banners of De Montfort the Younger and the barons who had gathered at Kenilworth. Together with de Clare's division, the royalists deployed on Green Hill, with de Clare's division on the west side of the ridge.
So yeah, again, that's very sneaky, using Simon de Montfort's son's banners on the way up there.
And Edward.
Not really what you would call chivalry.
Wards on the east. Prince Edward used captured banners from Kenilworth, signalling his presence. Their approach led to a chilling realization for the baronial army. They initially believed they were facing de Montfort's son, but upon discovering it was the royalist forces, de Montfort expressed dread and accepted the dire fate that awaited him. De Montfort realized he was trapped and urged his captains to escape either across the Evesham bridge or by fording the Avon. However, none of them accepted the offer. De Montfort then ordered his army to deploy and fight.
That would have been the wise decision, I think, given what I know already. But yeah, they should have gone and regrouped, or just fled for the time being.
It was their only chance. They formed a cavalry column followed by Welsh and baronial infantry, led by Humphrey de Bohun. De Montfort himself and his retinue were at the centre of the attacking force. At 7:30 a.m., de Montfort gave the order to attack as he rode forward with his horse together with his eldest son, Henry. The baronial cavalry charged across the soaking wet grassland. A fierce battle ensued in the centre of the royalist line as the baronial army tried to break through. Heavy combat broke out as the cavalry put many royalist infantry to the sword.
And they're so outnumbered. I mean, look at that. You got just 4 units here, and they're just automatically outnumbered in the first row. That's so crazy.
Then de Clare's troops outflanked the baronial army due to how the armies were initially positioned. Edward carefully controlled his troops, preventing them from charging wildly and allowing them to wheel into the exposed flanks of the baronial forces. Some of the royalist cavalry rode south to cut off the baronial cavalry from its infantry. These, however, did not clash yet, as the Welsh infantry lagged far behind the baronial cavalry. Then the rearguard suffered an unexpected shock. Mortimer's cavalry stormed across the bridge, charging the rear of de Montfort's column. Understanding they were outnumbered and surrounded, the startled Welsh infantry fled the battle before having fought. In contrast, the English foot and cavalry among the baronial forces fought fiercely, aware that failure meant death or captivity.
It'd be interesting to know what would have happened if that rear charge hadn't have came from Mortimer, because that might have made the difference in this battle. I know they're outnumbered, but I mean, they fought to the last man in this battle, so...
The fighting was brutal and deadly with no quarter given. King Henry, positioned amid the chaos, found himself threatened by royalists who mistook him for a member of the baronial army. He pleaded for his life, emphasizing his identity as the king, and was spared. Meanwhile, the intense battle raged around de Montfort and his sons. When Henry was struck by an enemy lance and fell from his horse, de Montfort reportedly told his men that it was time for them to face their fate. De Montfort continued to fight alongside his knights, witnessing the deaths of dozens of them. Despite his age and eroded warrior skills, he fought valiantly but sustained several wounds. Ultimately, the loss of blood caused him to falter and fall, at which point his enemies descended upon him. His body was subjected to brutal mutilation, including decapitation and dismemberment, with the remains left for scavengers. Simon the Younger and his troops arrived too late to rescue the baronial army, witnessing the grim sight of his father's head displayed on a pike as a war trophy. The battle claimed the lives of 4,000 baronial soldiers out of a force of 5,000.
Wow, man.
After the battle, the monks of Evesham Abbey were granted permission by King Henry and Prince Edward to collect and bury the remains of de Montfort and his knights. They were interred under the choir in the abbey's church as a sign of respect for their foes. After de Montfort's defeat, King Henry III returned as the undisputed sovereign of England once again. However, he inherited a kingdom with a number of rebellious barons. The Second Barons' War lasted for another year and a half. In October 1266, leading bishops facilitated an agreement called the Dictum of Kenilworth between the remaining supporters of de Montfort and the royal government. This agreement allowed disinherited rebellious barons to regain their lands under the condition that they pledged allegiance to the crown and paid substantial fines. The Statute of Marlborough passed into law in 1267, incorporated legislative and administrative reforms from the provisions of Oxford. Though Simon de Montfort's rebellion failed, he played a major role in England's constitutional development. He is regarded as one of the progenitors of modern parliamentary democracy.
So, as I said in there, pretty crazy, like a lot of things, had they have gone one way or another, could have really changed the outcome of that day or the future of this country. So I thought that was really interesting. I'm glad I got a little bit up on that. There's more things I want to find out now. I'm going to go on down a rabbit hole and do some research. But I hope you enjoyed that. If you did enjoy that, you come and check out our live streams on Thrones of Britannia. It's not the exact same time period, but my town is actually in the game, crazy enough, because it's only a small town. But yeah, we're playing through that. That's really cool. If you like strategy, war games, war tactics, things like that. We've got lots of other games on the channel and lots of other videos coming up, and I do a bit of everything, so there's something for everybody. Thank you again. If you've liked this video, thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video, guys. Bye bye.